Gabe.
Good morning.
Worship.
Welcome to First Christian Church. Some things are still, buttons are being pushed, people are coming in, socks are being donated, thank you very much. And I happen to know that half of our musical team has to get up and walk out the door at 11:30. So I am going to start whether everyone's in the room or not, in an effort to try to be more or less on time for those folks. So, as we have gathered on this beautiful morning, let's begin with a word of prayer. Will you join me? How long, O Lord, are we called to wait? How long, O Lord, are we asked to work at things that seem to be in vain? We cry out with the exiled Israelites from the shores of Babylon, seeking a word from the prophets. We seek a word of hope and peace and come together once again as a people. Grant us hearts which love beyond our walls and boundaries. Grant us wisdom to work for your reign. Grant us peace as we see your hand at work beside us. Help us this day, O God, to be your faithful people, following in the footsteps of the one you sent, Jesus Christ our Lord, in whose name we pray. Amen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The rain has stopped, the sun is out, and we are glad to see all of you here today. We are an open and affirming church committed to nurturing each other in spiritual journey through worship, Bible study, artistic expression, and Christian education. And every Sunday we print on our bulletin the fact that we are open and affirming. We are glad to have each of you here today, and I hope you will sign our guest registry in the fellowship hall if you are new to our group. We also invite all of you to stay for a moment after church for coffee and some fellowship. And now, if you are able, please stand for the call to worship. Trust in the Lord and do good, so you will live in the land and enjoy security.
We will trust in the Lord.
Take delight in the Lord, and the Lord will give you the desires of your heart.
We take delight in the Lord.
Commit your way to the Lord, trust in the Lord, and the Lord will act.
We commit our way to the Lord.
Refrain from anger and forsake wrath.
Those who wait for the Lord shall inherit the land.
And now our opening song is Gather Us In on the screen behind, or in your hymnal on 280.
You First reading is from 2 Timothy, chapter 4. It says 6 through 8, 16 through 18. Daphne, when you're ready to switch the slide, I want you to double tap because I'm going to stop at 8. 16 to 18 really doesn't add as much as I had hoped it might.
16 to 18?
Just leave it on that slide. No, just go back.
Go back.
And we're going to skip that second slide because it doesn't add enough to be worth doing right now. I changed my mind, is what that really means. And I forgot to send a note to Carol to change the bulletin. That's not uncommon. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 6 through 8. Paul is wrapping up his letter here. As for me, I am already being poured out as a libation, and the time of my departure has come. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. From now on, there is reserved for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give me on that day. And not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. May God bless our understanding of this reading of the Word. As we have gathered together, we turn our attention to the joys and concerns which we have laid at the foot of the cross, and we remind ourselves of the blessing that comes in joining together in prayer. I start with the partner churches from the Christian Church in Illinois and Wisconsin, our sister churches that hopefully we are all praying for this week. The First Christian Church of Creve Coeur, Cuba Christian Church, or Cuba, depending on which part of the state you're from, and the Central Christian Church of Decatur. Let's see, from the Smiths, concerned sister Elaine is not recovering well and may have heart problems. So we lift up our prayers for Elaine. Evelyn gives thanks to God for the prayers for Nicole and David. They are both healing and doing well, and we give thanks to God for that progress. Dan lifts up prayers for cousin Stephen and family in the death of his wife Carol, who succumbed to a journey from Alzheimer's. And so we lift up Dan's cousin Steve and the extended family. Sue leaves a note for us, prayers for Joshua and prayers for our son-in-law John and his dog, who needs one more certification for graduation Friday. Let me catch you up if you're not familiar with that story. John is a Illinois Highway Patrol officer, right? IHP? State trooper, yes. And he's becoming canine certified. And the first dog, and he washed out. They just didn't connect. And so this is dog number 2. And hopefully we're getting really close because that has been distance learning to boot, which makes an added challenge for family care and all those things that we often don't think about. So we are hopeful with you. Hopefully this week is it. And they can start doing their job. Anka has left a note. I want to thank everyone for their prayers for Draga. He passed away on Tuesday night. We'll call those were cancer complications. Please continue to pray for Jovan and Sophia. Also a joy, Amanda Cook continues to be in remission, but now Ron Cook has been diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver. But it can be managed, so that's good news. So, lots of joy and concerns and hope for that extended family. These are the cards which I have received. We know there are others that have gone unwritten, unmentioned, and so we take a moment of silent prayer to lift up these and those others as we go together to God in prayer. Join me now in that spirit of prayer. Gracious, mighty, and loving God, as we come before you yet again with our concerns, expressing our joys, and lifting up the prayers we ask your blessing on this time. We hold this time as sacred, for the time it connects our hearts collectively with you. We are thankful you hold this time as sacred, for the time it connects you to all of our hearts together. God of grace and love, we offer fervent prayers for the ministries and members of our sister churches in Crèvecoeur, in Cuba, and in Decatur. Pour out your blessings and wisdom upon these congregations and help them to be salt and light to the world. God of grace, we ask your blessings on many who are seeking healing and hope. We give you thanks for the blessings we have seen in your hand at work with Evelyn's grandchildren, with Nicole and David, and we thank you and praise you for that progress and pray that it will continue and the healing will continue to develop. We offer our prayers for Elaine as she struggles in recovery and ask your blessings upon her healing process. We pray for Joshua and John and his, I don't know the name of it, dog, and ask your blessings upon all of that progress and the full-time reuniting of that household and family that we anticipate. God of grace, we are aware of those in our circles of love and concern that are grieving. We ask prayers for Stephen and his family in the death of Carol, and we ask your blessings on all the extended family for Dragan as he succumbs to his battle with cancer. God of grace, continue your blessings of healing and wholeness for Jovan and for Sophia, for continued blessings for Amanda, and blessings of healing and wholeness for Ron, as well as we journey in these broken vessels. God of grace, we offer prayers for wholeness in the Christian community this week. We are aware of so many fractures and challenges and elements which allow detractors of your believers to point and say, see, you can't even be whole together. Help us to heal. Help us to listen with compassionate ears. Help us to engage with hearts of love. Help us to know each other's hurts and hopes and recognize that your love extends to all who believe. Guide us with gentle tones in our debates and corrections of one another. Help us to be personifications of your undying love. God of grace, in this week which is ahead, we ask your blessings of safety and care over all of your children, but especially, O God, your children, as they go out into the world and celebrate All Hallows Eve. Keep them safe. Put a heart of care on those that are contemplated evil and turn their hearts to the good. We know that our society is in a challenging place. So we turn to you, O God, and ask your blessing, your guidance, your help, and your hope to all of your creation. For we recognize that we are but a part of it, and we seek to be a blessing to all of it. Guide and direct us in this week, O God, and help us as we seek to be your people, now and forever, in the name and for the sake of Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Amen.
Today's reading is from Luke, chapter Luke 18:9-14. It is the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector. He also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and regarded others with contempt. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, was praying thus: God, I thank you that I am not like the other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week, I give 1/10 of all my income. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even look up to heaven, but was beating his breast and saying, But God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his home justified rather than the other. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled. All who humble themselves will be exalted. Blessed are the reading of these words.
Where there is no
Yeah, I wrestled with whether to start today with my traditional prayer because, it's a continuation. So shouldn't last week's prayer count? And we could, but no. Good try, Alice, but no. Especially because we have done a great job of getting ahead of schedule. I can't tell you the last time I got up this early. Oh, I forgot that I got up this early. So, now is the time for Children's Church, and those who go out for, and the rest of us stay in. I got so excited about the time, I ended up forgetting to do children's dismissal. So, will you pray with me? Gracious God, we have indeed sung our praises, offered our prayers before you, and read from your holy word. Now, O God, as we seek to interpret your word, be with us, guide us, help us, and protect us, that the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts will be acceptable in your sight. For you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
So, I feel like an episode of Adam West Batman. Last week, here's what happened. We talked about the importance of justice. We talked about the importance of recognizing injustice and rising up, but rising up in prayer to get in touch with what God is calling us to do in response to injustices. And there's probably more of a few of you who's going, wait a minute. Barb read this parable and I don't see it, Rick. Good. That's the way I like it. Remember, we're in the middle of a chapter where we have these seemingly completely disconnected parables. Luke has given us first this story about the unjust judge. You remember that one where the lady's beating on the door at all hours and finally says, "Shut up, woman!" Loosely translated. And I'll just give you, go away here. And how much better God will be at blessing us whom he loves. This week, Jesus tells us this parable of two guys praying. I got some problems with this. Let's start there. I've got some problems because, hey, who is Jesus talking to? Now, you Wednesday night attenders, you know you should have been ready for that question. Who is Jesus talking to? It was right there in the text.
His disciples.
No, good try. That's always the safe answer. That's right up there in Bible trivia, right? Where you say, if you're not sure, you say, Jerusalem. Right? Same idea. No. He is talking to people who are self-righteous and believe in themselves. And so he tells them this parable. Two guys go up to pray. The Pharisee, who is very public and stands with his arms out and says, "Thank you, God, for making me better than all these other scum." Loosely translated. I think that's what the Greek actually says. And then the tax collector, who doesn't look up to the sky but bends down in prayer, beats his breast and says, "Help me, a sinner." Now, the problem I have automatically is both of these guys are way too public for my taste. Right? Both of these prayers are highly visible, which doesn't match up with the humility theme that Jesus seems to be portraying in both of these parables, these stories. Jesus is setting us up and taking us down a path of be humble. How did we end last week? We talked about Micah 6:8, right? Remember that? Seek justice, love kindness, walk humbly with your God. And here in this parable, we have the same kind of theme. The one who prays humbly is the one who receives the justification or blessing. Justification is a weird word in there, isn't it? This one goes home justified. John MacArthur felt pretty justified this week. You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. On half the women in the room, yeah? Most of the men, what? John MacArthur is a very conservative evangelical preacher in California who was big in the news and discussions this week talking about women preachers. Does that help? Yeah. Now! Oh, that's who did that. John MacArthur basically said of Beth Moore and others that the first main quote was actually, there is no biblical argument for a woman to be a preacher. To which I respond, oh, let's sit down and talk, because there's plenty. We'll get back to that. Then later, and he got set up. I want to tell you briefly about dealing with the media. How many of you have ever done an interview? Newspaper, television, whatever. How many of you, with your hands up right now, also felt like after it was over, your story got told exactly accurately? Wow, good for you. That is rare. In my very first ministry, well, I should say in my very first full-time ministry, one of the first things I did, I was new there, I was the minister for education and youth, and there was a vacation Bible school that happened the week before. The reporter comes in, she takes a picture, we're going to get newspaper coverage, this is good, it's going to magically grow the church, at least in the mindset of those that arranged for the article. This was long enough ago people actually read the newspaper, so that was a plus. And we chat, and I'm like, yeah, we just came off a vacation Bible school. Reporter, how was that? Oh, it was great. We had a really good time. Good experience, lots of kids, everything was great. And so the beginning of the article said, after running a very successful vacation Bible school, blah, 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 and off into the article. And the article was pretty good. The problem is the woman who was the actual coordinator for Vacation Bible School was ticked because suddenly I took credit for it in her mind because of what was written in the paper. This was a 10-second throwaway chat as we get going, in my mind, discussion. And she turned it became a whole thing. It was ugly. John MacArthur was asked for a brief, pithy statement. Was actually asked for that about Beth Moore. In the midst of he's already in trouble, right? He's already said there's no biblical argument for women to preach. We're going to get back to that. He's asked for a brief, pithy statement. And he's dumb enough to comply. And he says, go home. And, ooh, did things get ugly from there? Did you see any of this? And justifiably so, because as I recall from Joel on through, we were told that not only our young men would see visions and our old men would dream dreams, but we would prophesy, women and men. There it is, women and men would be called forth to prophesy. And I can tell you, the vast majority of my aha moments in listening to sermon has come from the voices of women. Thanks be to God. I have been guilty makes that sound bad. I have been known on a bunch of occasions when I was a regional minister to say to search committees, if you want someone who will be a pastor, who will listen, who will be loving, who will visit, who will take care of those day-to-day connectional things, please call a woman minister. Because men, at least this man, is not naturally gifted in that. And hasn't been nurtured in that the way that our society tends to nurture women. Women like Beth Moore and all of those who are called to preach are not called by humans, but are called by God. And who in the heck, including John MacArthur, thinks they have a right to say what God has said is not right? Certainly not me. So I support all my sisters in the pulpits this week. I am thankful for every one of them, and I give thanks that in whatever bizarre divine way, the timing fit with talking about that very public look at me Christianity. Because I think some of what we encountered with John MacArthur, we encounter with this Pharisee that says, I know you love me more than everybody else, God, and here I am making sure everyone knows it. And again, I got a problem with that. Which leads me to more news this week. Anybody see what Kanye West dropped? Jesus is King. Right? This is born out of Kanye's Sunday service. Are you familiar with this? Kanye West, music producer, entrepreneur, into everything, microphone interrupter, crazy man sometimes, has been having these music-driven, hip-hop-driven Sunday services, celebrations of Christianity. And on the one hand, as a pastor who wants the faith to be translated to the next generation, I look at Kanye's work and I say, okay, whatever it takes, let's get the gospel out there. And on the other hand, I think, are we really pointing to Jesus, or are we still pointing at Kanye? And I don't know the answer to that one. This is the same man who declared not 5 years ago in his music, I am God. And it feels a lot like that Pharisee. And I fight with it. But Rick, that says I will grant justice. And I want to call your attention back one more time to the text, crazy as that may be, where Jesus says, that one, the one who prayed humbly, will go home justified. Again, a weird word to have crop up in the midst of a parable. So what does justified mean in first century Bible talk? Excuse me. Because that's one of our challenges, right? We read our modern English American Bibles with American translators, with American mindsets, with American words, and we think, oh, we know what that means. I'm justified in my behavior. God will find me and my behavior more acceptable, right? A more faithful understanding of justified is fully cleansed, fully heard, fully known. You see, what we are getting here in this encounter, remember the whole scope of the chapter. We are getting a judge who granted justice, who let someone have what is needed, and we're reminded that God will give us what we need even more. And then we have these two prayers. One that claims he is full and whole and forgiven, and one that admits he needs it. And what Jesus is saying is, when we humble ourselves before God, then God is most likely to bring us to wholeness. Let me try this from a different angle. If I were to show up at your house with a loaf of bread and a can of tuna fish, would you be excited? It's okay to say no.
It depends.
It depends.
on the type.
If I haven't gone grocery shopping. If I show up on Lower Wacker Drive with a can of tuna fish and a loaf of bread,
Excitement.
there is excitement. There might even be a battle. Especially if I only have one little can of tuna fish and 5 little loaves of bread. Maybe I should have said 2 cans of tuna fish. That would have been better, right? I could have played off the parable completely. What was I thinking when I jotted that down? Those who need it the most tend to appreciate it the most. So I ask you, is there justice, is there justification in knowing God, as you know I've told you 100 times if I've told you once, who is absolutely crazy in love with you, is fully ready to fully forgive you. There is justice there. But we get there by knowing we need God's justice. If you look back later on today or think about it again and take one more look at this parable, what you will see is Jesus showing us one prayer who says, I don't need it, and I'm so thankful that you've made me beautifully that way. And one that says, oh God, I need you. Please make me the way I need to be. That's the one who will see wholeness. May God help us find that kind of wholeness. Amen.
Amen.
So, our invitation song is one you've sung before. This will all tie in. Why don't we go all the way to the song slide, Daphne?
Okay.
Just one more. There we go.